This is PediaCast.
Welcome to PediaCast, a pediatric podcast for parents. And now, direct from the campus of Nationwide Children's, here is your host, Dr. Mike.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to PediaCast. It is a pediatric podcast for moms and dads. This is Dr. Mike coming to you from Nationwide Children's Hospital. We're in Columbus, Ohio. It's episode 511 for February 9th, 2022. We're calling this one Keeping Teenagers Safe While Driving. I want to welcome all of you to the program. We have an important topic for you today, especially if you have teenagers in the house. Of course, learning to drive is a rite of passage for teenagers, but it's also a high-risk time during the learning period and those first few years as an inexperienced driver. In fact, car crashes are the leading cause of death for 16 to 19-year-olds in the United States. Plus, 250,000 teenagers end up in U.S. emergency departments every year due to injuries associated with driving. So there's definitely a need to make driving safer for teens, and it's doable once we know specific risk factors and then come up with effective ways to reduce those risks. Fortunately, there is a team of investigators on the job keeping teenage drivers safe. Dr. Matt Zhu and Dr. Ginger Yang are principal investigators with the Center for Injury Prevention and Policy at Nationwide Children's Hospital. They're on a mission to lower injury and death rates among those teenage drivers. They will be here shortly to share what they're learning and to provide you with practical tips for parents and pediatricians as we all work together to improve safety for new and inexperienced drivers. Before we get to them, I have a message from the contact page I wanted to share with you. This comes from Gary in Utah. He says, "Hi, Dr. Mike. Thank you for the great content over the years. I value the research and advice you provide. I have heard lots of mixed messages on COVID-19 vaccinations for young kids. I want to be as informed as possible when considering this for my children. What is your perspective and feedback? Thanks, Gary." Well, that is a terrific question, Gary. And I think whenever you get mixed messages about anything, it's always important to consider the source of each message, the evidence and experience relied upon to arrive at a particular conclusion or recommendation. Also important are the goals or motivation or agenda of that information source. Now, fortunately for us in the United States, we have an extremely trustworthy mechanism in place to look at data and provide recommendations with the goal of protecting those who live in our country. And that mechanism is overseen by the National Institutes of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, is it an absolutely perfect system? No, but it is as good or better than any other system in the world. And there are tons of checks and balances. There are public hearings. All of the data is available to sort through. But you do need insight into the context and significance of specific data. You know, if you're not an expert in this area, it is really easy to misinterpret and then misrepresent numbers and the facts behind those numbers, and then arrive at conclusions that are quite frankly faulty. So it's really important that you understand where that message is coming from and the expertise of those making that message. There's also ongoing surveillance with our system after authorizations and recommendations are made in case of unexpected side effects or consequences or complications. And when significant things are found, they act. You know, that we change. That's why recommendations change. You know, people say, "Oh, they were wrong. They didn't know what they were talking about." No, as more data becomes available, we're going to change recommendations based on the best information, on what we know. And the reason is because at their core, these are good people who, you know, pride themselves on doing a fantastic job of keeping us all safe. You know, that's what they do. And they're proud of their work and they're good at their work. So when the NIH and the FDA and the CDC provide an authorization and recommendations, I trust it for myself, my family, my children first, and then for the kids and families that I treat. And I do it in that order because I would never get behind a recommendation that I would not follow myself. Now, I can pretty much guarantee wherever you're getting mixed messages from, they do not have the same depth of experience, scrutiny, and deliberation as those people taking pride in their role of protecting the American people as individuals, as communities, and as a nation. They really do take that role seriously. So when a recommendation comes out for kids 6 months to 5 years of age to get vaccinated against COVID, I would absolutely 100% do that for my kids, and I would 100% recommend it for children and families I treat. Because that recommendation, that message will be coming from a system that I trust. So I hope that helps, Gary. And of course, thanks for the question. All right, let's move on to our usual reminders. Don't forget you can find PediaCast wherever podcasts are found. We're in the Apple and Google podcast apps, iHeartRadio, Spotify, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, and most other podcast apps for iOS and Android. If you like what you hear, please remember to subscribe to our show so you don't miss an episode. Also, please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts so that others who come along looking for evidence-based child health and parenting information will know what to expect. We're also on social media, and we love connecting with you there. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Simply search for PediaCast. And if you have a comment for me or a question, much like Gary in Utah, it's really easy to get in touch. Just head over to PediaCast.org and look for the contact link and leave me a message. Also, I want to remind you the information presented in every episode of the podcast is for general educational purposes only. We do not diagnose medical conditions or formulate treatment plans for specific individuals. If you have a concern about your child's health, be sure to call your healthcare provider. Also, your use of this audio program is subject to the PediaCast Terms of Use Agreement, which you can find at PediaCast.org. So let's take a quick break. We'll get Dr. Matt Zhu and Dr. Ginger Yang connected to the studio, and then we will be back to explore keeping teenagers safe while driving. It's coming up right after this. Dr. Matt Zhu is a principal investigator with the Center for Injury Research and Policy at Nationwide Children's Hospital and a professor of pediatrics and epidemiology at The Ohio State University College of Medicine. Dr. Ginger Yang is also a principal investigator with the Center for Injury Research and Policy and a professor of pediatrics at Ohio State. One passion they share is keeping teenagers safe as they learn to drive and during the first few years of their driving career, which is a high-risk time for crashes, injury, and death. But before we talk about safe teenage driving, let's meet our guests, Dr. Matt Zhu and Dr. Ginger Yang. Thank you both so much for being here today.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a pleasure to chat with both of you. And before we jump into safe driving for teenagers, I had mentioned that both of you are principal investigators with the Center for Injury Research and Policy. What exactly is that, Matt? What is the Center for Injury Research and Policy at Nationwide Children's?
Our center is funded by Dr. Gary Smith, and our mission is to reduce injury-related pediatric deaths and disabilities. We are one of the first 12 centers of emphasis within our research institute at the Nationwide Children's Hospital. And our center is one of the only 9 injury control research centers currently funded by the CDC.
Yeah. So you really are looking at keeping kids safe and doing whatever research is necessary to make that happen with lots of funding at the federal level. And I've been doing it for a really long time. You had mentioned Dr. Gary Smith kind of started the center way back when. And I've known Gary for a long time because he was, in pediatric emergency medicine before he started that center. And so we go way back. So anyway, you have to tell Gary that I said hi when next time that you see him. Let's go ahead and jump into teenage driving. So, Matt, what impact do motor vehicle crashes have on teenagers in the United States? Like, why should we care about this problem?
Motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death for teens aged 16 to 19 in the United States. About 7 teenagers die from motor vehicle crashes every day in the United States. Nearly 700 teenagers are treated in emergency departments for motor vehicle crashes every day in the United States.
Yeah. So 7 teenagers die and almost 700 are injured every day in the U.S. That's a lot of a lot of kids impacted by car crashes. And there's also a societal cost for distracted driving related crashes. I'd seen just here in Ohio, $1.2 billion every year, which is over $2,000 a minute that it really costs society because of distracted drivers and motor vehicle crashes that happen as a result of that. Ginger, what risk factors are associated with teenage motor vehicle accidents? Like, what are the 4 main categories that we have to think about?
I think there are many risk factors that elevate the crash risk among teens. First, teenagers, they lack of driving experience. When they are inexperienced, they encounter some situation they don't know how to handle. Second, probably is they often exhibiting risk factors. The second is they are willingness to take a risk because they don't recognize that it's a risk. So, for example, they are speeding, they follow too close to another car, or they drinking after they are driving. They can also facing many distractions, and that, for example, cell phone use while they are driving. Sometimes they also have a teen driver passengers in their car, and that creates the distraction. And the nighttime driving also is another issue because when the light situation they cannot see well, that can affect their decision making. So I would say experience definitely play a significant role, and another is their willingness to take a risk because they don't know that could be risk.
Yeah. So they're inexperienced. They're risk takers in general with all sorts of things in their life. And of course, with cell phones today and smartphones, I mean, there's just so much distraction opportunity available inside the car. And then you mentioned after drinking, after drugs of any kind, really, just any substance use, and then driving a car can really be an issue. So definitely lots of ways in which it's risky for teenagers when they get behind the wheel. Now, in terms of the experience part of it, I think it seems like things are a little better than when I learned to drive. So when I learned to drive, you took driver's ed, you took a test with an instructor in the car, you took a written test, and then you were just given an unrestricted license. But there's really more of a step up process these days, right? Tell us about that.
So right now there is one thing called graduated licensure process. So the teen, as you said in the past, they just take the test to get to the drive license. Now they basically the first step, they will give them learner permit. So that require adult or their parents sitting in the car help them learning to drive. And after that stage, they will go to next stage called the intermediate drive licensure phase or probation period. So during that phase, the teen can driving without supervised by adult, but they also in the limited condition to driving, and particularly limited to those high risk conditions. For example, certain time they cannot driving during the night, and they limited to only one passenger in the car, and they definitely cannot use the cell phone while they are driving. They also have the age, like how older you can start the second phase, and also how long you need in the first phase before you progress to the second phase. Then until they driving in this limited phase, of course, when they are 18, they can be the full licensure, but we also sometimes have the years they are in this second, they go to the next phase depending on each states are different.
Yeah. I was, that's one of the comments I was going to make, is that it is different from state to state. And what you're describing is how it is here in Ohio, and many other states, have similar systems. But as I'm thinking about this, really, we have to let parents play a really big role in this, because if we're going to say that there are these conditions that you can drive in, your parent doesn't have to be in the car, but you have to maintain these criteria and conditions. There's got to be some trust between the kid and the parent that this is really going to happen. You really are not going to use your smartphone. You really are not going to be driving at night. And so how can a parent ensure that those conditions are going to be kept by their teenager?
Parents definitely play the key role in helping their teens become safe driver. And there is evidence showing the parents what they can do is several programs showing. The first is they can discuss with the teen, set the contract. We call it the contract. So parents communicate their expectations that when you can, when you need to be home, and so that create that contract. Both parents and the teen agreed, so the teen follow this contract to practice safe driving behavior. So that have been shown effectiveness improve safe driving because they communicate with their teenagers. And then the other approach is parents to talk to their teen, communicate with their teen about driving safety, and that need to be start with teach them about driving, sit in the car when they are teach them talk about the driving safety, and also practice with them why they are driving. So practice with them, tell them this is something you need to watch and how you do. So that way to help a team become safe drivers. Um, and our program here at Nationwide actually doing that is we engage parents, training them about utilize the motivational interview skill to discuss with their teen about driving safety. So in that way, parents discuss with non-judgmental, and also motivate the motivation from their teen own motivation, want to be driving safe, instead of I do this because I want to, the key. And so when I not have that restriction, they were not driving safely.
Yeah, yeah. Really good points. I want to circle back around to the contract. Do you recommend that you write that out? Like, these are the things, and then you sign it, and your kid signs it. So when you say that that's a useful thing that has been shown to improve safety, it's actually a written contract, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Basically, that is the parents need to discuss, but also write down, both agree, because when you write down instead of you talk, everyone remember, and the parents can also utilize to say, okay, you did not do this, you will have a consequence. It is not what they need to do, but what the consequence associated with if they did not follow what they are agreed. So the basic approach is use both. Have the contract, but to also motivate teen to driving safely is because they want it to be, not is because I want to do this for my parents. They want to do them for themselves, so that behavior can be more stay with them even when they become adults.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. And we need to model the behaviors that we're asking of our teenagers too, right? So when even before, so you may be listening to this and you have a kid that's 13. Now is a good time to make sure that you're following all the safe driving rules yourself, so that you're coming from a place of where you're not looking hypocritical, or asking your kids to do something that you're not doing yourself. So make sure that you understand the safe rules and follow them. Matt, what are some of the risk-taking behaviors that are associated with teenagers and motor vehicle crashes? Like, what are the things that parents should especially be watching out for and talking to their kids about to make sure that they're not taking those risks?
Here I mentioned two risk factors. One is distracted driving. The other is driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Distracted driving is highly linked with cell phone usage. Cell phone related distracted driving includes calling, texting, looking at apps, and various other use. We analyzed the 2019 National Youth Risk Behavior Survey and found that 2 out of 5 high school student drivers texted while driving. So this is a high percentage. Studies have shown that cell phone use increases the crash risk by 4 times. Another risk factor is driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Drinking any amount of alcohol increases the crash risk. Given the same amount of blood alcohol content, teens are more likely to crash than older drivers. As we all know that marijuana use becomes more accepted through legalization. The access to marijuana increases. We see an increased number of teen drivers under the influence of marijuana. Our recent study found that 13% of high school student drivers reported driving after marijuana use, relative to 5% for driving after alcohol use.
Yeah, so definitely no smartphones, no cell phones should be used while you're driving. So no texting. And really, it's better not to even have phone calls, right? Especially for those really early drivers. And then substance use, definitely a no-no. Some other risk-taking behaviors that I don't know, even as adults, as experienced drivers, there's still some risk-taking things that we do that are sort of soft, like speeding, for example. So, an adult that's keeping up with traffic on the interstate and you're going 5 miles an hour over is different than a teenager who has not had that same experience. When you think about reaction times, and you really want to keep those speeds lower for those earlier drivers. So, that's definitely a risk-taking move. And then, some kids just want to put the pedal to the metal and go as fast as they can. And certainly that's going to be risky. Paying attention to stoplights, not speeding through the yellow lights, but yellow means start slowing down now, not speed up and try to make it through the intersection. So we don't want to run those orange lights, right? The ones that are halfway between yellow and red. So that's going to be an important thing to not do. And then too many passengers in the car, not wearing seatbelts, maybe trying, your luck on a country road with your lights out just for the thrill of it. Like, these are things, it's okay to talk to your kids about this, right? You're not going to put those ideas in their head to go out and take those risks by telling them about them, right?
I agree totally with you, Mike. You talk about passengers. Studies have found that passengers are associated with teenage crashes. Carrying one passenger increases the crash risk by 40%. Carrying 2 passengers increases crash risk by 90%. Carrying 3+ passengers triples the crash risk. And there's another risk driving factor. It's called light driving. Per mile driven, the fatal crash rate for light driving is 4 times that for daytime driving. So all these factors like passenger distraction, light driving factor, they are regulated by graduate driver licensing laws. As we know, they are the known risk factors for teen drivers.
Yeah. So nighttime driving, and the more passengers you have in the car, the more dangerous it is. And then that's something else to talk to your kids about. They're not only going to be driving, there's going to be instances where they're the passenger, and they ought to know that you're going to be safer in that car if you're not distracting the driver while they're trying to drive. So, have the conversations before you get in the car. Maybe just listen to some music, or, it's a little awkward, when you got everybody in the car and no one's saying anything. So I don't know, maybe music would be better, but conversations, like, you really have to, in engaging, you use a part of your brain that is going to be taken away from paying attention to the road. And so just to keep that in mind. Are there particular ways that we can help lower those risk factors other than just talking about them?
One well-known injury prevention framework is called 3 E's. The first E is education. Today, we are doing PediaCast. This is one form of education, educating parents about communicating safe driving among teens. The second E is engineering to design out hazards. This includes technological solutions, and I can discuss this later when we have specific risk factors such as cell phone-related distracted driving. The third E is enforcement, passing and enforcing traffic safety laws. All these, there are ways to help lower these risk-taking behaviors. So Probably I can give you one example and about engineering about distracted driving technological solutions. For example, we know there's a driving mode and the cell phone blocking apps. They can block cell phone use when the app or the built-in mode detects the phone is traveling, the owner is driving. It will silence the notifications for calls and texts, and also it will block your access to the app.
So I want to add is another technology solution we are currently implementing in our study is provide direct feedback to the teen drivers when they are driving. So remind them, for example, the technology called in-vehicle device that a lot of insurance company utilize that to check the mileage driven and save the gas. But we can use that to put in the car that is have an OBD function that can detect the car moving. So when the teen driver speeding exceeded the speed limit, that beep will starting. So that in the real time, they know, they are reminded you are speeding. So although the parent is not sitting in the car, this serve as a virtual parent to help them, remind them you are speeding or you turn too faster. So the technology can serve that function as well.
Yeah. And that can be in the form of devices inside the car and also apps on smartphones. And as Matt had mentioned, those apps can even detect, hey, you're moving in a car now. It's going to block access to texting and phone calls and other apps. And so that can be safe. And then those kind of technologies can then send some of that data to the parents, right? And then that will help to inform conversations that you can have with your kids, in terms of their driving and how they can improve with the safety.
You're correct, because we are doing the study right now is actually utilize that feedback provided to parents. The real-time feedback to kids, we also give them summary reporting every other week. So showing how they did compare their peers. So then we training parents to use that objective information instead of their own judgment to discuss about their teen driving behavior. So we also instruct the parents not only just focus on negative sides, should also praise if they did a good job. So we find that the parents like it because that they can use this as a teachable moment to teach their teens about their driving safety. And the teenagers also feel I have approved. Maybe I stop too fast, too sudden, or brake too hard. Is because I'm doing the right thing. Some car in front of me, they did wrong, but I did not. So I avoid hitting them. So that indicates also they did a good job. That indicates the proof they do a good job. So I think both sides can help with the technology. Really helps
Yeah.
with the driving safety.
Yeah, and I love the positive reinforcement. I mean, it's easy for us to focus on the negative, and so it's always good to give them a pat on the back when they're doing a good job. And then, like you mentioned, there may be a reason that you broke too. I mean, if I hadn't done that, I would have, crashed the car. And so that the nuances of that doesn't come out unless you're actively having conversations with each other. So really good points. So the 2019 National Youth Risk Behavior Survey showed that 39% of high school drivers said that they texted and or emailed at least once while they were driving in the previous month. So, I mean, that's approaching close to half of teenage drivers. So we definitely have work to do in terms of raising awareness and talking about this, because it only takes one text message to result in a tragedy. So it's this is really important stuff here. And it's the distraction is not just with texting or email, right? I mean, it is even, especially early drivers, even phone calls can be distracting, right?
Yeah, the passenger can be also distracting, especially teenager in the car. So that is why there is also the when they are driving, there is during the probation period, we are limited to number of passengers in the car, as Matt just mentioned, that as you have additional passenger in the car, especially teenagers, that increase the risk. Now, other distraction can be they are eating the food, or this can be also distracted.
Yeah, absolutely. As we think about smartphone use and distraction, the distraction is actually on many levels, right? So in order to manipulate the device, you have to take a hand off of the steering wheel. So, now you're not at that 10 and 2 position anymore. So that is a distraction. But also your eyes come off of the road. So we have a visual distraction. And then also as you're thinking about what you're going to text back, your mind is off of driving. So now you have a cognitive distraction. So it's not just a simple distraction. I mean, it's like on 3 different levels. And so I'm sure that those add up, to a huge amount of distraction for teenage drivers. All right, Matt, let's talk a little bit more about drinking alcohol and drugs and the effect that has on motor vehicle crashes. There was a 2020 study in JAMA Network Open that showed that nearly 50% of teens reported marijuana use, and it reported that many of them reported that they did drive under the influence of marijuana.
Yes, actually, this is our recently published article. As we know that, in Columbus, Ohio, medical marijuana has been legalized, and there are efforts to legalize recreational marijuana in Ohio. And nationally, marijuana use become more accepted through both legalization for medical and recreational use. And we definitely see an increase. We definitely see an increase in number of teen drivers under the influence of marijuana. Marijuana substantially impairs driving ability, particularly vehicle lateral control and reaction time. Several meta-analyses reported that marijuana increased the crash risk, and the estimated crash risk varied from 26% to 166%.
Yeah. And that's mostly through slower reaction times.
Slower reaction time and also vehicle lateral control. This means weaving the lane. It's not maintained within the lane.
Yeah. So the effects of marijuana sort of making you feel good and having joy do not translate well to controlling a motor vehicle.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so that's something that, a lot of parents don't even know that their kids are using marijuana. And so if 50% of teenagers report that they have used it recently, I mean, there's an opener conversation right now, to talk to your kids about, are they using marijuana or not? And we have to be careful how we have those conversations, right? Ginger, you had mentioned in a non-judgmental way, like, what is your suggestion for kind of strengthening that parent-teen relationship and talking about things that are difficult, like marijuana use?
So the good point, the difficult conversation do need to occur. So what we say, the parents non-judgmental probably use more open-end question approach instead of, so let's discuss about this issue. And in our program design, we do have give a parents conversation start, so they have to discuss, because these all the issue can impact on their driving. So that is something parents can discuss with the teen. And also, even they are not using that topic, need to be discussed. If they find that they are discussed, using that even need to be discussed more.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I think that just, especially if there are folks who are listening who have young kids, it's really important to start at an early age having open lines of communication without judgment. So, because if there's judgment there, kids just aren't going to talk about it, right? And so if we really want to help our kids make good decisions, we have to have those hard conversations in a non-judgmental way. But even early on, like this starts way before they're 16, so that then when you get to the marijuana discussion, it's not as unexpected because we talk about everything anyway. So I'll get off my soapbox, but just generally as a pediatrician, we definitely want to encourage parents and their kids to have those open conversations because they really are so important. So how can parents strengthen the parent-teen driver relationship? How can we make that stronger, Ginger?
In addition to the effective communication, as we said, the discussion or this parents also can provide a more positive and supervised driving experience. So parents need to engage when they are learning, provide a supervised driving experience, including teach them about different road type. So kind of hands holding as they go in. And also parents themselves also need to be have good driving behavior for the teen to model. We find our study, we teach parents about safe driving discussion with their teens. Actually, they said, okay, I better do myself, not this using the cell phone while I'm driving. I also not speeding because sometimes parents also rush and the speeding. So parents to be a good role model to serve with their teen. And the most important when come to the driving, parents, as we said, non-judgmental, also be supportive to their teens when they are learning to driving. Understand that yes, everyone make a mistake, but to make sure next time you don't make a mistake when you are driving.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, so we've talked about some of the technologies that parents can tap into to help their kids drive more safely, the trackers that are in the car and the smartphone apps. I understand that you did a research study on the effectiveness of the smartphone apps. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is an active study. We will recruit about 1,200 young drivers around Columbus, Ohio, and this is a randomized controlled trial. And this is a 5-year project, and we will start enrollment in March this year. So basically, we have 2 active interventions. One is built-in cell phone driving mode. This can be Apple's Do Not Disturb while driving, or Google's Do Not Disturb while driving, or Verizon's driving mode in Messenger Plus app. And we also have a commercial cell phone blocking app. So they will be compared to see either the cell phone blocking app or the built-in drive mode. Is effective? They have the same effectiveness, or one is better. We hypothesize both the built-in drive mode and the commercial cell phone blocking app have similar effectiveness, and the built-in modes are free, and they work well. Even there is a system upgrade from the phone operation systems. So we are just starting this project. It's a 5-year project.
Gotcha. So the application that's just a part of the phone, is there something within the settings that you activate those kind of modes?
Yeah. So basically, for example, for built-in driving mode with iPhone, so there's an option you can set for the Do Not Disturb option. You can choose based on the phone GPS, or when there's a Bluetooth connection with the vehicle, then the mode will be activated, and it starts to block calls, text, app use, and there are also a visual message that to show you that you will not receive notifications while you are driving. And also you have the option to automatically reply that you are driving. You are going to reply to these calls and text later after you stop driving.
Yeah. And so your study is looking at those those systems that are just built into the phone to detect that you're driving and to sort of cut off communications at that point versus commercial apps that that you install. And so you're thinking that they're probably going to be equally effective, but you're trying to show that with your data, correct?
That's somehow correct. And so basically we have, I didn't mention we have like 3 arms. In randomized clinical trial, we have to have a control arm. For this control arm, we have an inactive cell phone blocking app that doesn't block any calls, texts, just running in the background to track all these calls and texts. And then our 2 intervention arms are, one is the built-in driving mode. The other is the cell phone blocking app. So they are going to compare with the control arm, and also I compare these two. While we hypothesize that these 2 intervention arms, the built-in driving mode and the cell phone blocking app, are as effective, why do I have the cell phone blocking app? One reason is that we need to track all the calls and texts. If we just have the driving mode, they are built by Apple. They don't provide the ability to track any calls and texts. With this commercial app, we can set it active or inactive. So we can track all these calls and texts.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the control arm just has an app just so that you can keep track of when people are driving and whether calls and texts are happening or not. And then the built-in app, that's one arm. And then the app with the app in it is the other one.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I also want to talk about some technology solution we are working to improve general teen driving. We are finishing developing an app called Behind the Wheel. This app is in collaboration with our Research Information Solutions and Innovation (RISI). We developed this app to quantify driving behaviors and promote safe driving among teen drivers. So basically, this cell phone app tracks driving behaviors such as speeding, hard braking, and cornering. It provides individualized feedback on driving errors, driving safety score, and driving badges for teens. It also has 18 supervised driving activities for parents to practice with teen drivers. And these activities include parking, turns, driving in the rain, and so forth. So this is we do have a pilot project with CDC. This is a feasibility trial, and we plan to enroll 90 teens to pilot test this app and determine the preliminary efficacy of this app.
Yeah, so this is an app that really does like the in-vehicle tracking stuff would do, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to show you, it's kind of like a black box, like an airplane black box, right? To let you know, are you braking hard? Are you accelerating too quickly? Are you speeding? And then it reports that information back to the parent, again, to inform conversations. And then your research is to look, does this increase safety, right?
Yes. So this app is different from Dr. Ginger Yang's project. This is more towards like teens. So the app is installed on the teen's phone, and the feedback is provided directly to the teens. It's for general all the teen drivers. And I think for Dr. Ginger Yang's study is focused on teens with traffic citations. So this is more towards the teen driver side. Currently,
Okay.
That is correct. We use the technology. Our study is focused on high-risk teen drivers, those drivers who are 16 and 17 years old. They start in independent driving first time, so they can driving without adult sitting next to them. But these teen drivers also receive traffic citation. So the research showing those first teen driver already have 3 or 4 times higher risk compared to 20 years older. And if they receive the citation, those make them even higher risk about the crash, because they tend to those certain behavior, patterns associated with the risk. So our study basically use when they receive the citation, parents cares about their teen drivers. So we use this as a teachable moment because they receive the citation. Now parents are talking, okay, my insurance increased because you're on my insurance, right? So, and parents also care about, because they can be, if they make one mistake, they can make another citation that, or the mistake that can cost their life. So we use that as a teachable moment. We put the in-vehicle device in the teen driver's car, and then we also, this is also randomized trial with one group as a control. The one group just feedback from technology only. Then another group we have a feedback plus parent training. We're training parents utilize a motivational interview technique to discuss with their teen about driving safety, use the feedback from the device and also report from device, as I just mentioned. So in that way, take that teachable moment to help a teen improve their driving safety.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. So, Ginger, your research is really focused on those high-risk drivers and then parents using the information from the tracker to inform conversations. And Matt, your current research is really more an app on the teenager's phone that's going to give feedback to the teenager on a regular basis on how they're driving, and then to see if that kind of technology helps to improve safety and decrease crashes and injuries and deaths, right?
Yeah, you are
That's correct.
correct. And I think also Matt's study population is early when they just start learning to drive. So at this time, they first time learning. But my study population is those teenagers already passing that supervised period. So they become most higher risk because they can driving unsupervised for the first time. So that is, but the approach is overall, we use a different approach. Both Matt's study and our study is with the goal to help these teenagers to be safe drivers.
Yeah. What kind of timeline is so I think, Matt, did you say it was a 5-year project? So when are we looking at having results?
So I have like 2 projects for this, basically for the really novice teen drivers. For this project, it started like February this year, and this is a 2 years and a half project. So it will end July 2024. And another
Okay.
project is really about cell phone use while driving, the technological intervention. That's a 5-year project. For that project, it will end in 2026.
So you guys have all kinds of stuff going on, and we're going to have more answers and be able to improve safety based on your research in the coming years for sure. So Matt, there is a driving simulation lab at Ohio State. What exactly is that?
This driving simulation lab offers a state-of-the-art facility to measure driving behaviors. They have like 3 separate simulator systems, a fully instrumented sedan cab, a drive-on setup, and also a desktop simulator. Actually, Dr. Ginger Yang uses the driving simulator lab, and she can add more details.
Yeah, so that is thank you, Matt. We can tell you a little bit about using the driving simulator with our current study, actually also funded by NIH. So that is called using the most sophisticated. It is high fidelity driving simulator. So that driving simulator have a full cap, just the person driving just sitting in the real car. That is a Honda Accord that is actually provided by Honda because OSU have a collaboration with them. Then the person driving in the car is not moving, but the screen is full cap. The screen is actually moving, so you feel like you're driving in the real world. So our study is actually utilized to study about the teen drivers when they have a TBI, how that TBI affect their driving, and when they can be ready and return to driving. So the study is focused on we have teen drivers when they injured have a TBI within this age group is 16 to 20. So because we know the teens also have a high risk of crash and also have a high risk of TBI. So they can both. The group is a high risk for both issues. So when the kids get suffered the TBI, the teen driver had a TBI, that affect their decision making, and they also affect their reaction time because the brain injury. And driving is such, you need to make a decision with a different situation such a short time. So we actually have teenager who had a TBI driving on the driving simulator. And then we also have a matched control who don't have a TBI also driving at driving simulator. So we can compare if they have any deficit after their TBI. In addition to that, because they are in the driving simulator, so we actually increase the cognitive load when they are driving. So we provide the distraction to the driver when they are driving in the driving simulator without actually risk them. So the question we want to answer first is whether the TBI affect their driving. So we compare them with their uninjured control. Second is maybe they can drive, but not in the destructive situation or high cognitive load. So maybe if not too many traffic, they can drive, but if the traffic situation, they should avoid. So we have that additional to see the cognitive load to help them. So the physician, based on the result, the physician maybe make a decision, a recommendation, say, okay, first you should not driving. Second is you probably only driving in the certain condition, not the other, to address that research question. Then we follow them from their injury. We have them driving every week until their symptom resolution. Then we have them driving another drive. So in that way, we can see how their driving performance. So we can say maybe you don't go back first week, maybe you can go back the second week. So far, this is in collaboration with University of Alabama. So both sides will do the same, the protocol. So far, we had enrolled 2 cases. Both cases cannot finish the simulator the first within 96 hours. That indicate maybe it is not safe. But we don't know. We just have 2 cases enrolled.
Yeah. So this is really early on in the research. I just want to point out for folks, TBI is a traumatic brain injury. So we're talking about kids with concussion. And just as there are recommendations for returning to school after concussion, and there are recommendations for returning to sports and physical activities, and the slow return and physician supervised return after concussion, what we're saying is that most likely there needs to be a slow return to driving as well. But we want some numbers to prove this. And, is it safe after 1 week? Is it safe after 2 weeks? Do you really have to wait for the symptoms? And how long do you have to wait for the symptoms to be gone? We want to answer all those questions. And we don't want to do it by putting kids at risk on the road. So we move them into the driving simulator to drive at various points after their concussion to see, at what point it's safe or not safe. And then, so you've only enrolled 2 people, and I suspect there's going to be more. I'm sure the pandemic has not helped with that, because I think there aren't as many kids getting concussions during the pandemic. But once school sports is back completely normal, unfortunately, we'll see more concussions. Can folks get in touch with you to see about enrolling if their child has a concussion in their driving age?
Yes, of course. And this is also we just started the second year. As you said, the pandemic could be affected, but we also need to be them enroll the study within 96 hours of injury. So we actually going to the schools, tell them about the study. So we want them to be in our study. And we are not taking those individuals who are in the learner phase. We are taking the individual who either have probation driving license or the full license. But I really appreciate you made the point about return to play and the return to school. So right now, there is no guideline about when the teens can return to drive. In Canada and Australia, they have recommendation no driving within 24 hours. But in United States, no such recommendation. The most study that conducted relate to return to driving is among those who have severe TBI. So they have the period not driving, then they return to driving, but there is no study looking the teen drivers who still learning to drive. Their driving skill has not fully developed. When they have concussion, also type of a mild TBI, then really impacted them. The judgmental could put them not only themselves but also other drivers thinking about the football player driving himself to the football games, sustained the concussion. Then so what? Is he driving back himself or need someone actually driving him back? So those issues, we hope our data can provide evidence for clinician make the recommendation.
Yeah, I definitely think that will be helpful. And just as an aside, a little shop talk here, you may want to tap into the emergency department in terms of recruiting folks to enroll in your study, because we see a lot of kids with concussion. And we, of course, have research assistants, and I'm sure that there could be a collaboration with getting more kids enrolled that would meet your criteria. But we can talk about that after the podcast is over.
Yeah.
So what is up next then? You guys have a lot of projects ongoing. What other questions do you have? What other research do you see in the future related to safe driving?
So Mike, I want to add something. Maybe this is related to driving simulation research or the next safe driving research. So we are planning a project to work with Maria Tiberi Foundation Simulator Lab. The driving simulator lab is not at Ohio State. It's at the TOES Career and Technical Center in Plain City. And it features 25 desktop version simulators. They have 16 different lesson plans. And this lesson takes about 6 hours to complete. So we are discussing this project with Maria Tiberi Foundation. We plan to enroll about 140 teen drivers a year to evaluate the effectiveness of these driving simulator lessons. For folks who are not familiar with Maria Tiberi Foundation, this foundation was established by Tom Tiberi. Tom is the weekday sports anchor of 10 TV News in Columbus, Ohio. And this foundation was established to honor his daughter, Maria, and their efforts are devoted to better driver training and distraction-free driving in Ohio. So this is the project we are trying to do. And this project will evaluate the effectiveness of driving education. And I think the effectiveness of driver education classes in terms of improving driving safety, this is still unknown in the academic field. And also Maria Tiberi Foundation has these driving simulation lessons. And with our randomized controlled trial, we can evaluate the effectiveness of these driving simulations for teen drivers, for the new drivers.
Yeah. So as new teaching techniques and ways to impart information comes about, we can test that safely in a driving lab rather than, seeing how many accidents actually happen and then finding out what kind of instruction that they had. So it's just a safer way to figure out best practices for driver education.
I would say it probably is just in additional in the innovative way to deliver the education, as Dr. Zhu just mentioned. So instead of you just go to the website for the lesson or you give you the print material, this have you hands-on. Actually, you practice that driving skills in the simulate the environment, so you actually encounter the high risk situation instead of you just reading it, you actually experience it. So in that way, when you actually driving in the car, you already experience certain event and knows how to deal with it.
Yeah. Kind of like a flight simulator for airline pilots. And you start throwing emergencies at them and see how they handle it. The same kind of thing. I bet the teenagers really love it. Isn't that? It's kind of a fun thing, right?
Yeah, this is really fun, and then they have some high school students to take it, and they love it. And the funny thing is, I was there to test, this driving simulator license with 5 of my team members, and all my team members enjoy it very much. And I think someone passed the test with maybe 100% score, but another team member failed the test and was put in jail because of something I forgot. Maybe he intentionally did something and was put in jail. And then they have all these legal procedures. And it's really great, like a driving simulator. And you have a steering wheel, you have the brake, and it feels real.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And that's at Toll's Technical School in Plain City, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So Ginger, we haven't talked about policy at all yet. There are a lot of states have, cell phone laws that are present. How effective are those at keeping all of us, not just teenagers, safe?
So you made a very good point, because the research showed that when the top down, that is a policy always important, because that help the behavior change or outcome. So having a policy itself may not be sufficient. So having it on the book is not sufficient. We need to bring it to street. So how enforce it, that is very important. I know that here the enforcement may not be much. Even have a policy, if you're not to enforce it, is not going to make the impact. I know Dr. Zhu have done some research with cell phone law. Those maybe he can tell you more, but I think it is very important to have the policy to improve the outcome. Dr. Zhu?
Yeah, Ginger mentioned 2 aspects of policy intervention. One is have the law on the book. The other is have the actual enforcement. I'd say both are effective. For graduate driver license law, it's just the law on the books. The parents reinforce the law. There's no active police enforcement, but graduate driver license law has been shown to be very effective. Our research has found that graduate driver license law have reduced traffic crashes by teenagers for 20%. This is just the law on the books. When we talk about the cell phone laws, we recently just analyzed U.S. fatal crashes from 1999 through 2016, and we found that comprehensive handheld bans were associated with lower driver fatality rates. Basically, the comprehensive handheld bans ban almost all handheld cell phone use, including calling, texting, and app use. We also found that calling-only ban, texting-only ban, and calling and texting bans don't have the same life-saving benefits as the comprehensive handheld bans. Currently, about 20 of 50 states have comprehensive handheld bans, and we strongly encourage the remaining states to pass comprehensive handheld bans. And our finding has got a lot of media attention, and it has been reported by over 240 TV stations, including CBS, NBC, and ABC. So definitely, I'd say it's important to have the laws on the books. And if there's active enforcement, if that's possible, you may have more effects in terms of cell phone laws here.
Yeah. So the graduated programs, with supervision and gradual increasing of independence of the teenage driver is really the way to go, especially when parents take an active role and in making sure that all the safety guidelines are followed, and having those conversations with their kids. I'm going to wrap things up with the top 6 pieces of advice that pediatricians can give to support safe teen drivers. And so these are things, when we do have a lot of pediatric providers who listen to this podcast. And so these are things that you can talk about with your families, but then these are also things that are going to be important for parents to talk with their kids about. So I'm just going to run through these real quick. One, and it really goes again down to those 4 big risk factors that we had talked about: inexperience, risk-taking behaviors, substance use, and distractions. And so those 6 big pieces of advice would be, of course, don't drive at all after drinking alcohol, using marijuana or other drugs. So there's the conversation about kids using them to begin with, but the important thing here is do not drive after you use them. And then put those phones down, use hands-free options if, it's an absolute must. So, that Bluetooth connectivity and you push the button on the steering wheel to make the phone call. So it's hands-free. So both hands are still on the wheel. But the best thing is don't use your cell phone at all, unless it's an emergency and you really do need to contact someone. And then number 3 is to keep a safety first mindset, that driving is a privilege and that it should be taken seriously. And again, by having the contract with these things written down, it reinforces that this is a real serious thing. And then the fact that we're going to talk about it and kind of monitor your driving and those kind of things. And then I love number 4, and that's to communicate what the teen driver is doing well, in addition to what areas need improvement. So that positive reinforcement part of it, you want to have good conversations in addition to the difficult conversations. And then number 5 is to set expectations for safe driving and enforce those expectations with consequences. And so, what those consequences are is going to really be dependent upon your family and what motivates your child to not want those consequences to occur. It may be you can't drive for a week, or it might be you can't watch TV for a week, or, you can't hang out with your friends for a week, or whatever, whatever is going to motivate your kids to take this seriously, to not only have those consequences in place, but be ready to follow through with whatever those consequences are. And then finally, number 6 is that parents should always be a role model for safe driving. So no driving after substance use, avoid distractions yourself, avoid risky behaviors. And you should really be doing that as soon as your kids are able to watch you drive, which is really during the young child years. So if they grow up with the role model of safe driving, the hope is that they'll be more likely to become safe drivers themselves. Does that those are the 6 big ones, right? Did I miss anything there?
No, you said very well. And these 6 are very good advice to parents.
Yes. So everybody pause and rewind a couple minutes and just listen to those again. And that'll also help you write those contracts for your teenage drivers.
So,
all right. Yes, please.
Mike, I want to just add, we talk about teachable moments, right? And when an injured teen visits an emergency department, at that moment, he or she is more open to receiving some clinician counseling about changing their behaviors. These are the teachable moments, when they are injured. This can also happen during the regular pediatrician visit, but when they are injured, they might be more open to receiving messages about changing their behaviors.
Yeah. That would be an interesting helping hand with these 6 things on it that could be handed out in the emergency department when kids do come in from car accidents to help facilitate those teachable moments. See, more shop talk here as we're trying to figure out how to collaborate in the emergency department. All right. We are going to put a couple links in the show notes for you over at PediaCast.org. We'll have a link to the Center for Injury Research and Policy at Nationwide Children's Hospital if you'd like to learn more about their work. And then there was a really great article in Pediatrics Nationwide, which is a publication of Nationwide Children's, called Teens on the Road: How Technology, Policy, and Parents Influence Driving Safety. Really well done article, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well so folks can find it very easily. So we really thank both of you for your time today, and hopefully we can make the roads safer for all of us, and especially for teenage drivers by following all the things that we've talked about today. So Dr. Matt Zhu and Dr. Ginger Yang, both with the Center for Injury Research and Policy at Nationwide Children's Hospital, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to discuss safe teenage driving here.
We are back with just enough time to say thanks once again to all of you for taking time out of your day and making PediaCast a part of it. Really do appreciate that. Also, thanks to Dr. Matt Zhu and Dr. Ginger Yang, both with the Center for Injury Research and Policy at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Don't forget, you can find us wherever podcasts are found. We're in the Apple and Google podcast apps, iHeartRadio, Spotify, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, and most other podcast apps for iOS and Android. Our landing site is PediaCast.org. You'll find our entire archive of past programs there, along with show notes, our terms of use agreement, and that handy contact page if you have a question or a comment that you would like to share with the audience. Reviews are helpful wherever you get your podcasts. We always appreciate when you share your thoughts about the show. And we love connecting with you on social media. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Simply search for PediaCast. And don't forget about our sibling podcast, PediaCast CME. That stands for Continuing Medical Education. It's similar to this program. We turn the science up a couple notches and offer free continuing medical education credit for those who listen. Of course, that includes doctors, but also nurse practitioners, physician assistants, nurses, pharmacists, psychologists, social workers, and dentists. And since Nationwide Children's is jointly accredited by all of these professional organizations, it's likely we offer the exact credits you need to fulfill your state's continuing medical education requirements. Of course, you want to be sure the content of the episode matches your scope of practice. Shows and details are available at the landing site for that program, PediaCastCME.org. You can also listen wherever podcasts are found. Simply search for PediaCast CME. Thanks again for stopping by, and until next time, this is Dr. Mike saying stay safe, stay healthy, and stay involved with your kids. So long, everybody.
This program is a production of Nationwide Children's. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on PediaCast.